Suffering arises when we actually are failing to see reality clearly. Emptiness is not a nihilistic void.
It's just an exploration of the gradient of unconsciousness to consciousness for all of eternity, and sometimes you're contracted.
The bad news is that we're all in free fall, and the good news is that there is no ground.
Maybe that actually means that I'm neither.
Time is fabricated, built in mind.
Any experience is beautiful. Like deep suffering and grief has beauty in it.
Empower the path through belief, and then we walk.
To bear your cross is not necessarily then to suffer.
Maybe like it's actually not that bad. All right, so welcome to the Architects of Perception. I just changed my podcast name. I thought Architects of Perception kind of fit. So this is the first episode with that name with my friend Ethan. Ethan Nelson, AI savant and spiritual seeker, just like myself. We had a great conversation last week?
Yeah, I think
sometime
so, 2 weeks
recently.
ago.
And I just wanted to, open up some space for another one. So I sent him a list of some of my favorite Dharma talks from this teacher, Rob Berbea, who we cited in the last talk, who, in my opinion, kind of goes way beyond any other Dharma teacher, spiritual teacher that I've found in recent memory. And so I showed him a list of my favorite talks, and he listened to one called Freeing the Self. And so he sent it to me, and I listened to part of it again, and it opens up with something really profound, which is that in Buddhism, the fundamental understanding about the nature of suffering is that suffering arises when we actually are failing to see reality clearly. We get caught up in a really illusion, in perceiving reality in a way that is not congruent with the way that things are. And that is what spawns suffering. So, profound statement. It's not that suffering is actually inherent in experience. It's that misperceiving reality causes suffering. And so I just wanted to open up with that, see what you think. And I could explain more about kind of the Buddhist lens on this misperception. But what did you think about that talk?
Yeah, no, that's a great intro to it in terms of not seeing things clearly creates suffering. But one of the things that I would add that really stood out to me about that talk is not only negative self-conceptions create suffering, but also positive self-conceptions. And really just this notion that, like, if I have low self-esteem and I see myself as like, oh, I'm a shitty person and I'm not enough, like, it's very easy to see how that's suffering. But to think like I am the best person ever and I'm amazing is equally suffering. I thought that was a really interesting idea. And then as he goes down the talk, there's a kind of a point that links to that, which is emptiness sounds like this really kind of like some people relate to it as like this is this bland, bleak thing.
Nihilistic.
It's like not super, it's inviting to the Western mind. And so just kind of like the invitation of think of like some negative self images that you have. What would it feel like to see those as empty? To see that they're empty of inherent existence, and how much freedom could you feel in this moment if you saw I am not enough as an empty concept, as an empty object.
Totally. And you said a lot of good things right there. And I think that's, at first I want to emphasize the fact that the word emptiness can be perceived in a way that kind of, again, feels meaningless, nihilistic, like it sort of is denying the juiciness of life. And that's not what it means. Emptiness is not a nihilistic void. It is empty, but in that emptiness is infinite potential for possibilities to understand ourselves, the world, our past, how we relate to the future. Infinite potential. There's no fixed objectivity there. So really, if there's a nihilistic experience of emptiness, and it's common, if there is that nihilistic experience, though, that's an indication that it really hasn't matured, or something is not fully ripened or seen, or expressed. Because emptiness in itself is almost indescribably beautiful and liberating. And the Buddhist path is about liberation. If you're not feeling that, we need to tweak the path. So, and then you spoke to negative self concepts. It's easy to say, oh, that's made up. What, let's see those as empty for sure. And then positive self concepts. Let's also see those as empty. Because no matter what, any self concept that we cling to, and through the clinging, we solidify, is going to be a cage. Because no matter what, I can't be a loser all the time. I can't be depressed. I can't be anxious 100% of the time. It's not possible. And just it's the same. I can't be a winner all the time. I can't be Mr. Life of the Party all the time. I can't be liked by everyone all the time. I can't be, kind all the time. I mean, maybe some people can, but let's be honest and say that any of these self concepts are actually a cage. And can we move to a place beyond the solidification of these masks, where we take off the masks over and over again and don't have to solidify any of them? Where sometimes I'm, the life of the party, whatever, and then sometimes I am deeply introspective and legit don't want to see anyone. And sometimes I feel sad. Sometimes I feel grief. Sometimes I feel depressed. And sometimes I feel very open and full of joy. And can we allow ourselves to open to really just the full spectrum of the human experience without grasping to any of it and saying, oh, that's who I am. Now I'm like this. Now I'm successful. Really? Are you? Are you sure? Or is that another mask? So I love that angle, is kind of moving beyond these solidified ways that we identify ourselves. Even saying I'm a human being, this seems, kind of far out to some people, but that is also an empty label. You cannot really inherently say we're human beings. That's a label that we came up with.
Mm-hmm.
What we are is deeper than that. And what we are, if we keep digging, is actually beyond any label, any concept. And I think the freedom is the mobility to go between different labels, where I can say, yes, at one level, I'm Ben in this body and mind. I'm a human being. I just graduated from grad school. Yes, those are true. But what about the narrative, the story, the concept that I am an expression of the divine? Everything I say, everything anyone says, any movement I express is actually directly linked to the source of all things. Can that be another lens that we have access to? Instead of saying, oh, I'm like this, I'm not like that, can we have access to that more enriching, divine perspective? And again, not cling to that, be able to let it go, but to try them on like different outfits, And so, yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it all resonates. And one of the angles that I'm approaching this from is to feel like I am successful or I am good or I am powerful or whatever the positive self conception is. I think one way to kind of understand how that is constriction and how that is suffering as well
Mm.
is is it feels like I always have to prove it. If that is the
Yeah.
identity that I'm holding on to, then I'm like constantly fighting against it because I'm like I want people to validate that back to me. And so there's like this constant feeling that I think this feeling of like I am not enough and I am enough, I think they're the same thing ultimately, because one is like I'm not enough, and then the other one is like I am enough, but I'm trying to prove to people that
Mm.
I am because I feel like I'm not. And it's like there's the same feeling behind both of them.
Yeah.
And so to think of like to kind of point to why this path is valuable, I think there's something around imagine how much better you would feel if you didn't have to prove anything. Like that's freedom. I don't have to prove
Bro.
my identity.
Yes.
No one needs to tell me who I am because they're
Mm-hmm.
because I am nothing and everything, and and there is no solidified thing there. And so I
Yes,
think this
sir. That's
exists.
I love that. I love that you said that. I love that you brought it there because it is. We have to recognize that even these positive self views, it's a lot of work to maintain them. For me, it's like a house of cards, and I'm trying to hold this thing together for the way that I look to other people, the way that I look myself. I'm a success. I'm a good person. It's just like, bro, fuck it. You are what you are, and what you are is, you know, again, divine. Like quite literally, can we allow what's trying to come through us? Can we honor that? And, this goes, I guess, beyond cultural norms. Or, oh, I have to be a good person. I have to be a success, a contributing member of society. That's what the culture says. And that's what's been, kind of spoon fed down our throats. We've been conditioned to believe that's true. But emptiness would say it's not. We again have been conditioned to believe that. And also in this present moment, if that's the narrative we're living, we're actually granting power to that narrative. We're actually feeding its power in our lives. And we don't have to. We can actually just say, I don't want to live by these norms, by these values. What if I don't want just like a ton of money and a ton, like, smoking hot wife? And what if I want like freedom more deeply than any of that? What if I want connection to God? Dare I say God? Have we forgotten that? Have we forgotten the necessity of sacredness in human existence? And again, we get caught in again the flat plane of existence, which is more material things. Like I think what we talked about last time, um, the uh, the infinite experiences. People have moved beyond materialism. At least a lot of people in our culture, like, oh, I don't want the money. I want the experiences. It still can be just flat, lifeless greed and trying to amass these infinite experiences. And there's nothing inherently wrong with amassing experiences, stuff, whatever. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. But in the deepest parts of our being, is that really what we want? Or do we want to, again, move beyond just the horizontal and access the vertical plane where there is soul gripping depth in experience? We can touch into deep meaningfulness, again, connection to God, divinity, sacredness, the source of all things. Do we crave that? If we're honest with ourselves, do we really crave that? Or have we been conditioned to say, oh, I'm good. Let me just float around in this flat wasteland and see what happens? Um, but yeah, do we have access to different, I would say, dimensionalities of experience? Understanding, yes, there is the dimension of more experiences and more stuff, but there's other dimensions that we can focus our desires on. In that talk, The Ecology of Love, Rob talked about um, Eros, the Greek god of desire. This is a part of human existence. There's no way we can live without desire. And, it can be sexual, it can be desire to connect with God, it can be desire to live into an image of ourselves. But if we focus our desires only on that flat plane, we'll find nothing satisfies. Again, we're in samsara in a sense. And then if we access that vertical plane of depth, deeper into the roots of soul and accessing the heights of heaven, you could say, poetically speaking, um, how does that nourish and feed the being in ways that affect our energy levels, our clarity, our senses of calm, our senses of love for what we are, the life that we're living? Um, these are open questions.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple things there I want to touch on. There's this connection to life piece that I think is really important. But before I go there, I want to touch on this feeling of like acquiring money and then acquiring experiences as being the same flavor.
Mm,
And there's this, yeah, and when we say acquiring money isn't bad, I think what that means is if your foundation is a fullness of experience, then
mm,
acquiring money is not good or bad. But if your foundation is once I acquire money, therefore I will become whole or something. That's like what we're trying to get away from.
Mm.
And so to kind of loop it full circle into this connection to life, we use the word God. Have we lost the word God or sacredness or divinity? I think at the end of the day, these words have lost their meaning for so many people. And so
Mm.
how I kind of approach that when I think about like what is my ultimate goal in life? What is my ultimate vision for what I want my life to become? It's this feeling of like having such a profound connection to life that I'm brought to tears. Like that's how I
Yes.
relate to
Mm.
it. And it's like to me like the word God, all that really translates to is I want to be so in awe of existence that I'm like brought to tears by the beauty of existence. And who cares if we put the label God on it or not? It's just
Yeah.
like that fundamental connection
Yes.
to the fact that we're alive at all. I think that is the most
Bro,
important.
you are talking my language right now. So again, those moments of deep meaningfulness. I remember when I was on a big, I mean, spiritual search in my life. I was working on these farms in certain communities, and I remember life was so simple. I felt so clear. I would go on walks at night, and I would look at the stars out in New Mexico, and I would just be crying and be like, "How could I have been so blind this whole time? Look at this place. What?" And that is that. I think the word that comes to my mind is intimacy. Intimacy with life, and that includes intimacy with maybe the darker elements of it. Because if we say, I don't like the pain, I don't like the anxiety, I push those experiences away, I say they're unacceptable. Interestingly, we're actually creating a duality between us and life, a separation. It's a mild flavor of dissociation, you could say, dissociating from that feeling. And it's actually in the connection to that dark experience, anxiety, depression, whatever, that we find it doesn't feel good necessarily, but it feels deeply right because we're back in relationship in that intimate dance with life. And obviously, there's still the good. And can we connect intimately with that? I've heard certain people talk about the role of ecstatic states in, I mean, you could call it healing. It's a necessary experience in the human psyche, the necessity of festivals, of trance states, of ceremony to access ecstasy in this life. When I say ecstasy, I mean like drinking nectar of the gods. It feels that good. Like when you're in the pocket at a show, at a festival with all your friends, just getting after it, dancing, that kind of nectar, surrounded by love, when you are deeply connected, passionately connected with your lover, that kind of connection. These meaningful moments when you're in nature and enraptured with beauty, that meaningfulness, again, you can call it whatever you want. I love how you said that. But just to be that intimate with life, to really, again, yeah, intimacy, that's what it is. I want to taste this place. I don't want to be at an arm's length. And I just love everything you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I resonate with that a lot, tasting the nectar of the gods. It's just like something I want to loop in here and see how you relate to this is this concept of dialogue being in connection with, right?
Mm,
I have this sense that a lot of people that dive into Buddhism or meditation, there's this kind of trap of I am awareness and let me just
mm,
observe.
mm,
And like ultimately you subject and object are not separate, but like that the act of dialoguing with that perceived separateness and it coming into contact with it and trying to bring greater degrees of truth into contact with like ultimately we're not all enlightened, so we all still perceive subject and object pretty much every moment of every day, so we might as well fully engage in dialogue with it
mm,
and
mm,
try to bring the insight into that dialogue as opposed to just I
mm.
am empty awareness Eckhart Tolle type
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Dude, we have a great chemistry on here because you bring up such great points. So thank you for that. And yeah, a couple things I want to point out is just, again, with Buddhism, it can seem kind of dry. Certain flavors of Buddhism, especially, can seem like, again, the life gets sucked out of a person too much, in my opinion. Trying to avoid suffering, actually, instead of sinking our teeth into the richness and the fertility of those experiences. Um, I would say the ability to know how to understand the mind in a way that we can reduce suffering is such a superpower. Absolutely. That is like the strength of the Buddhist path. Um, I mean, I think emptiness is the biggest strength, but the ability to reduce suffering through an understanding of emptiness. And like you said, spiritually speaking, a lot of people seem to become numb. Do you think, is that a valid word? Numb. I am awareness. I'm not engaged in life. We're all one. But, and Rob Berbea would say that for Eros, again, the god of desire, to live through us, we need otherness. We cannot exist with desire, because it's the desire to connect, the desire to connect to another person, to beauty, to love. That is desire, and we need an other in order to project our love on. Even if we love ourselves, interestingly, the mind creates
Yeah.
an other self. I am loving myself. So there cannot be love, there cannot be eros without another. So again, do we have, this is where it's the flexibility of views. Do we have access to the view of oneness? Because goddamn, that is a beautiful view to hold, but it's not a place to live. Because eros can't flow, and that the desire is what makes life so juicy. That longing, and that quenching your thirst in any way that you see fit. Um, that is what gives life that juiciness, where we can be really engaged in life. And I think the teachings of Rob Berbea that really speak about opening to the current of desire, not in a sense quenching that hose, not stuffing it down, but opening the flow. And when you open to desire, what do I really want? Is it, I mean, it can be carnal sexual pleasure. That's a classic eros based desire, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it can also be to live into a certain image. Do I want to be of service? Do I want to be strong? Do I want to be connected? Do I want to be loving? Like, can we not push away those desires? Do I want to be enlightened? Like, that's a desire. And like Rob says, teachers, Buddhist teachers will say, don't get rid of your desire too fast. It's like you're climbing a ladder, and the higher you get, the you can let go of the ladder rungs that you were holding on to before, but you have to reach the next phase in order to let go. So don't let go of the quest for real deep transcendent freedom too fast. We need to hold on to certain desires and progressively learn how to let go at deeper levels, and open up to something maybe, I don't want to say deeper, the current of life force that flows through us all the time without saying I should or shouldn't. Can
Mhm.
we trust that at deeper and deeper levels?
Mhm. Yeah, there's something about challenging emotions like anger and shame where I think that those are the first to be seen through as empty on this path, but in reality it's like they're not just going to go away. Like you can't just sit on the cushion and banish all of your anger and shame from
Mm-hmm.
your being. And I think to do so only creates more solidification, right? To
Mm-hmm.
try to use meditation as a tool to not approach shame and anger particularly. And it's like ultimately it's like desire and anger. It's like the goal isn't to get rid of these. I think we're always going to experience these emotions, but the goal is like, is there a better way to use this energy that's surging in my body? Like, is there a better way? And a lot of times it's not sitting on the cushion. A lot of times it's like, let me find a way to move this through in a way
Yeah,
that pushes me towards something that I desire rather than me turning it inward and becoming self-deprecating because I've solidified it into something.
yeah,
Um, so I think that's really important. And I think that
yeah.
there's this, I think that there's this, yeah, when we talk about like I am God, reality is infinite, I am not separate from anything, it's really easy to go into solipsism really fast. Like the only thing that exists is my
Mm-hmm.
experience of consciousness, and I think like on an ultimate level that's true. But I don't have access to your consciousness. Like I don't have access to your facet of the one consciousness. I don't have access to other people's, and so I might as well enjoy the dialogue and the connection with in to kind of like sum up all these points. A guy I like, I know you've heard of him as well, John Vervaeke. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
he he refers to this quote a lot, and I still don't feel like I fully understand it. But it's this, I don't even know who it's from. But he says, "Love is the realization that something other than yourself exists." I find that really
Well,
profound.
yeah. Hmm.
Like
And,
if I
yeah.
go all the way into solipsism, something feels wrong there. Like there's this recognition that like we are all one thing, but something other than myself also exists. It's like this other version.
Totally. And again, it's like, do we have access to multiple views, holding on to multiple dimensions of interpretation of experience? Where,
Right.
yes, we are at one level definitely separate. Duh. You could say that. And then can we have an equally valid, equally true view be that we are all one right now? So, again, having the flexibility where the emptiness, a core part of that teaching is not standing on one view and saying this is objectively how it is forever. It is right now. It's hard to hold both of those views at once. Maybe when we're fully enlightened beings, then we can hold completely contradictory polarities, um, non-dual experience in a sense. And I think that's honestly, I don't know if that's possible. I haven't had that experience, so I'll say I've had flavors of it, but it doesn't last. But I would just say again the flexibility of perspective, and it also points to the necessity of otherness. You could say if this is the cosmic dream, where creation is experiencing itself through our eyes, through our feeling body, then it needs to experience some level of otherness. And from we could also go back to the jhanas, which is like a whole thing, but the jhanas are deep states of meditative absorption where the mind becomes very tranquil and the fabrication of mind slows down quite a bit until it gets calmer and calmer and you hit what's referred to as the deathless, the cessation of consciousness. You enter a timeless place, a place beyond time. And you see time is a fabrication too. And that death is a fabrication, otherness is a fabrication. And the way I understand it, again, I haven't had that experience of really touching the deathless through samadhi, through jhana, but it seems like it would be subject and object have completely merged. So for traditional experience, you could say we need a subject, a viewer, and an object, a world to view. They are actually co-arisings. When there is a viewer, there is something it's viewing, always. And when there is something to view, there has to be something or someone viewing it. So we see the dependent co-arising that is subject and object. And in the experience of the deathless, the cessation of consciousness, that which is beyond the eighth jhana, um, subject and object seem to merge. And I hope maybe someday somebody who has direct experience of that can send me an email and let me know, is that accurate? Is it a pure non-dual experience? I mean, it's hard to call it an experience, but it's hard to even give it any words, honestly. But yeah, so that's what it makes me think of, which is anything, love, suffering, beauty, it's all fabricated. And that's not wrong, because anytime there's any experience, again, this is pretty deep, but it's like there is a level of fabrication of mind. That's the words the Buddha used, is fabrication. It's a constructed, concocted, it's a built experience dependent on certain qualities of the mind.
Mhm.
So yeah,
I'm
I don't know if that makes
curious.
sense.
I'm
But
curious on your end. Like, I also have this desire to like reach the depths of non-dual perception. It feels to me like the goal is sometimes I think I get lost in this feeling that like okay, to see through fabrication is to like that fabrication will dissolve, but I wonder if it's almost a sense of like the fabrication's always going to be there. I just see what it actually is. And then it's like, oh, yeah,
Mm,
there's all of these fabrications that I'm
right.
engaging with, but I actually kind of know something about them that I wasn't perceiving before. And like maybe that's the flip.
So exactly, this leads me to, I mean, how we started this podcast, which is that suffering arises through a fundamental misunderstanding about reality, the nature of reality, um, and seeing to the unfabricated. Actually, I mean, in the Heart Sutra, they would say form is emptiness and emptiness is form, right here and now. It's just certain quality, and that's the thing. The world and the lack thereof, the deathless and the world as we know it, are dependent arisings. So the way I understand it, they're dependent on certain qualities of the mind, specifically the qualities of tanha, which is clinging and aversion, craving. I want this, I don't want that. This push and pull that we are constantly engaged in, the level of emotions, things, experiences. We want some and we don't want others. And it's actually through the tanha, that's I think the Pali word for craving, we construct something to crave. We construct a world. So again, in the Tibetan point of view, the Tibetan Buddhists say that all that there is actually light and space. Everything else is a fabrication of mind. So when you see this as just luminous light and space, especially when you see the fading of perception in the jhanas, you see, oh, the mind, it attaches to things and it creates, oh, attached to this is just, I mean, you could say to my eyes, light. I mean, that's even a label, but like it's just light, different colors, and somehow I interpret this and contract around it and I make it a mug. So again, that's through clinging, actually, subtle clinging. And this happens so subtly, we can't even feel it. But actually, this clinging is suffering. It is subtle degrees of suffering. And this is where we say in Buddhism, where there is the experience of a world, there is clinging, and thus it is suffering. And thus, anytime you're here, samsara. It's a place that is actually created through suffering, through clinging. And other than that, it's just empty light and space. Um, so that's, again, it's dependent on certain qualities of the mind. So if we want to reach the deathless, the qualities of the mind would be a lack of craving, a lack of clinging and aversion. Whereas if we experience the world, there is clinging and aversion. And if we experience deep suffering, hell on earth, there is a high level of clinging and aversion. Um, so does that make sense? I,
Yeah, absolutely. Um,
I love that Tibetan quote about it's just light and space. So, and what they say is actually our experience here is just frozen light. Our experience of matter, as far as this is material and there's something that is not material, this is just frozen light. They say that actually the mind is playing tricks on you. This is still just light. We freeze it psychically, psychologically,
mhm.
through clinging. And from that view, I wonder again, how distinct is internal mind and the world we experience out here? When we start to loosen the way that we see things, can we start to manipulate matter in a different way? Andrew Holacek has a quote in Dream Yoga that's he talked about listening to a Tibetan Rinpoche, Tibetan teachers talk about dream yoga. And he said, the reason you can't walk through a wall in waking consciousness is not because that wall is solid. It's because you are. Your mind, the solidity of your mind and of your experience of self gets projected onto the world we experience. We're in a place like Tibet. There are stories of, I mean, what seems like magic, where they'll say matter of factly, their teachers will levitate from monastery to monastery in the mountains. Is that a story? Or are they pointing to something that's actually possible when the mind, the sense of self, and perception has been loosened? And I'm just saying, what are the possibilities for if we really apply emptiness? what is not possible. In a non dual sense, this world and us are not separate. The consciousness that views it and the stuff that we view are one thing. So when we loosen self identity, when we learn how to overcome fear, because fear, as Andrew Holacek said, is the primordial contractive force. When we're afraid, certain narratives, when I'm afraid of something, those narratives become very solid and dense because fear contracts. It contracts the mind, it contracts our sense of self, and it contracts our sense of the world. So this world that is in fear is tight and dense, and certain things maybe aren't possible. And it does make me wonder, though, miracles like Christ walking on water, is that just a made up story? Is it? Or what about miracles of, I mean, Christian mystics, as well as like Hindu saints levitating, miraculously healing people, being in multiple places at once? Are these made up BS stories? Or are these beings that have a certain understanding of the fluidity of reality and know it in their bones to where the world they live in changes? The what they have access to fundamentally changes. And again, in our materialistic world, a lot of people might say, there's no way. And to the mind that is trapped in materialism, there isn't. There is absolutely no way because your belief, the tightness of the world you live in won't allow miracles like that. That's a theory that I have, and I'm curious about it. I'm curious how deep that this goes. And there are people like Dean Radin, if you've heard of him, that kind of study things like extrasensory phenomena or psychic phenomena, and have found some really interesting things relating to exactly what I'm talking about as far as fields
Mm-hmm.
of belief and the allowance of miracles, levitation, things like that, which seem like absolutely crazy. But again, the reason we can't walk through the wall is not because the wall is solid, it's because we are. And so, what do you think about that?
uh, I've yet to encounter that firsthand, so I hold no opinions on that. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot I can say. Um, yeah, in particular, there's a few different things here, like extrasensory perception, and I don't know Rupert Sheldrake. I don't know if you know Rupert Sheldrake.
I do.
He has some really interesting thoughts about how the scientific paradigm constricts what is being studied. So there's potentially
Mm.
a lot of phenomenons that could be true, but that just aren't being studied because they don't fit within materialism as a paradigm. And I think that's central. It's like
Totally.
we all hold this paradigm collectively of materialism, and it shapes the world that we live in. And then to add on to that, when everyone around us is in a collective consensus that this, I mean, that's what makes it a paradigm in the first place, that
Mm-hmm.
everyone around us is in this consensus that this is how the world is, it makes it even harder to break out of it. And
Exactly.
when
Yeah.
we ground into, like, regardless of whether, floating and walking on water is true, I still have lots of skepticism.
Yeah.
But I think that there's something here to discuss, which is when you realize how fundamental perspective is. Like when you realize that perspective is more fundamental than matter. So we all think like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
like matter is what I'm interacting with. That is the most fundamental thing in the universe. It's like once you start accessing different states and different experiences of the world, you start realizing that your perspective is actually more fundamental because the perspectives you hold change the world that you're in. And it this concept has been really transformational for me in terms of this idea that, like, most people just think that everyone else in the world is just living, like, maybe they just have a different personality but they're in the same world. But when you realize that, like, the psyche that everyone has transforms the world that they experience, and almost everyone is actually living in radically different worlds, and it seems like some people you might have resonance with, and most likely it's because the world that you live in is probably more like coherent, right? But if I
Mm-hmm.
talk to someone with a completely different worldview, they might be living in a radically different universe than me. And
Bro,
I
yeah.
to kind of wrap it up, I think the goal with all this stuff with emptiness is like not to solidify any worldview, and such that whoever I talk to, there is never a worldview clash there. Like I can interact with anyone and not ever feel like, oh, like their worldview is wrong. It's just like, oh yeah, they're really solidified right now in their worldview,
Yeah.
and they're probably experiencing the universe radically different than I am.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
but I don't. I try not to hold that the one I'm experiencing is as true. You know, is
Totally,
ultimate.
bro. I think that's huge. I mean, what you said about perspective shapes our world, and we are all living in different worlds. And there was a talk by Rob where he cites the sort of multiverse theory and backs it up with Islam, mystical Judaism, Kabbalah, Hinduism. They talk about these multiple universes, and he interprets that as we all live in different worlds. Every single one of us, as unique as we are, is the world that we live in, built on narratives, conceptions, beliefs, and what is a culture and a religion, a tradition, but a group of people that have tried to sync up their um, worldview, their perspective.
Mhm.
And emptiness comes along, and this is what's so radical about emptiness is it shatters all of it and says, actually, we don't need to have the right one. We don't have to have the real worldview. We can actually stay in free fall. Like the Chogyam Trungpa quote. The bad news is that we're all in free fall, and the good news is that there is no ground. We're all in free fall without a parachute. It's kind of a dark situation. You're like, oh, this kind of sucks. And we try to grasp at things to try to save us. And then we realize there's no ground and we can let go. There's no ground we're going to hit. And that is like the miracle of emptiness. It's like I mean, creative genius, in my opinion, for someone to really zoom out to that degree to see that it's all empty. And then what's interesting, I mean, I don't know if I want to go this deep actually, but emptiness, it's an understanding that matures over time. Emptiness ripens like a fruit, and it gets deeper and deeper. So the more we go into emptiness, this might kind of mind bend some people, but even the understanding of emptiness is in itself also empty. It exists as a fabrication. But the fabrication of emptiness, in my mind, is like the skeleton key to open up your whole mind. It is still fabricated, but this fabricated view that everything is empty opens up infinity. So it's still fabricated. And in a sense, you can go to this is where it goes full circle to a non dual experience, which is, oh, everything's empty, so I'm experiencing illusion. At first, we start at that path. And as it matures, we see even emptiness is empty of any inherent truth. We come back to the absolute truth of illusion. um, so again, and it matures over time. So again, like a fine wine, we got to sit with emptiness and apply it in ways that feel right. Where there's a Tibetan quote too, which is you got to trust your experience, trust what feels right, follow that, trust your insights, but don't stop refining your view. So can we trust where we're at and still trust that this will mature until we reach deeper levels of freedom, deeper levels of insight that maybe we had no idea were possible through this ripening process?
Mhm. Yeah, I can't fathom how there could ever be an end to the path.
Mm.
It makes no
Well,
sense to me, this idea that there's an end state or goal
I'm,
of the path, because it's just
I mean,
like,
it
of
also,
course there's
yeah,
infinite layers of depth, and of course you'll never reach the end. And
it
yeah.
depends, but how we define the end, right? Like, and even the three main schools of Buddhism, enlightenment is a different thing. In Hinduism, moksha is different than Buddhist enlightenment. There's so, and again, with emptiness, you see any notion of path and of a final ending to the path is empty, empty, empty. It's
Mm.
fabricated. It's made. We make the path and then we walk it, and we can make it anything we want. And this is where it's like it starts to get can be kind of ungrounding at first. Um, but like again, Theravadan Buddhism versus Mahayana Buddhism and the Bodhisattva ideal, different flavors of enlightenment. versus the Vajrayana. The tantric path is more of that kind of infinite game, similar to Robert Baya's soul making dharma, which is that the infinite quest for more senses of sacredness, divinity, seeing all appearance as sacred appearance, not as
Mhm.
solid reality, but appearance, as Nirmanakaya, trying to merge, if you're familiar with the three worlds in Buddhism, Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, Dharmakaya, which I guess now that I mention them, I'll just explain what they are. The Nirmanakaya is the world of appearance, the way things appear to us. That's kind of base world. And then the Sambhogakaya is what's called the realm of power. This is where you start to get a little bit deeper into the nature of reality, of perception, and you see how things are much more fluid. And it's a realm of power because the way I understand it, that's kind of the place of magic, spirits, gods. And then you go deeper to that absolute Dharmakaya, where everything, you could say, merges, becomes non-dual, blends one in oneness. So we're experiencing all three of these worlds. Well, are we experiencing them simultaneously? You could say yes at one level and no at one level. So you could say the normal human being that has not questioned their experience is living exclusively in the Nirmanakaya. Um, and then, with shamanism, altered states, ritual, we can start to tap into the Sambhogakaya, the realm of power. And then Dharmakaya might be the deathless, the cessation of consciousness, or smoking bufo, 5-meo, who knows? But there are these three worlds that we live in, and I forgot where I was going with that, to be honest. But those are three schools, or three worlds. Oh,
I
right.
wanna
Yeah, go. You
I
got it.
wanna try to approach this idea of path, like there being a path, because I'm starting to have some insights as we're speaking that I've never considered before, and I'm curious to just spitball some stuff,
Yeah.
see what comes out. Um, yeah, so this the idea of path, like walking a path, implies time and implies linearity, and when you drop into emptiness and the implications of emptiness, you see that time is a construct. You see that linearity and here and there is a construct, and so it's like from the perspective of eternity and spacelessness, then there is no end to time, so how could there be an end to like a path, right? And so to kind of try to ground this in something, uh anything, which I don't think is possible, but
Yeah.
it's just like, yeah, there's tantra, there's Buddhism, there's Christianity, and it's, and from another lens, you could say that every perspective that exists in every human, not some might have more of a sense of what is true, but when you
Mm,
take the perspective that there is fundamentally no separation, then you're just realizing it's all gradient of one thing, and you're just like exploring that gradient for eternity,
mm,
and there's no destination, it's just an exploration of the gradient of unconsciousness to consciousness for all of eternity. And sometimes you're contracted and that's where you are, and sometimes you're free and that's where you are, and you're exploring it, and sometimes you're mistaking your identity for as the absolute truth,
mm.
and one other kind of like side note I wanted to loop in here is this sense that like you could to kind of loop it full circle back to the beginning of the conversation. We talked about if your self conception is negative, that's contraction. If your self conception is positive, that's contraction. But then I think there's a way in which you can use the path to wake up, where you say, "Oh, I used to be not enough, and now I feel enough. Whoa, which one am I? Like, am I this or am I that? Maybe the fact that I was once there, that self identity, now I'm this one. Maybe that actually means that I'm neither. And but maybe I can just play them both, and I'm also both, and I'm also neither, And also, whatever experience I'm having right now, no matter how contracted it is, it's a facet of existence. So like,
Yeah.
how could it possibly be like behind on the path or something? You know?
Mm, mm. I mean, you said a lot of really deep stuff, and I love that we're there. But I would say you get to a certain depth on the path, realizing the fabricated nature of a path. And there's a time to let go of that path, open up to, again, direct theophany in the sense of source flowing through us in every thought, every every word, every action, connection. I mean, the divine unfettered. Can we trust that? Even the sense of ego at a certain depth on the path is an artistic expression of source, no separation. And you could say also, this is a timeless place. Again, through the understanding this, the degrees of unfabricating through samadhi, through the jhanas, we see that eventually at the cessation of consciousness, at the deathless, that time is fabricated, built in mind. And if it is built in the mind, it's dependent on other things, clinging, and thus it's not inherently real. In the words of Ramana Maharshi, that I think it was Ramana or Nisargadatta Maharaj, that which does not exist in deep dreamless sleep is not ultimately real. And what exists in deep dreamless sleep? Nothing. I mean, you can't even say nothing. It's like, but so we're understanding. Again, you're pointing to the radical depth of emptiness, which is that all of this path ending, success, failure, measurement, empty, empty, empty is it is what we make it in a sense. And this again, as we start to talk about these concepts, it can be extremely ungrounding if we don't have a certain familiarity with the groundless. And that can be scary. There can be resistance, contraction in the psyche, in the separate sense of self. It can feel like a death, actually. It can feel like an annihilation of the self, because that's what emptiness is a recognition, not in annihilation. That's not what we're trying to do necessarily. It's just an understanding of how things are. um, and again, seeing reality clearly, seeing that self, other, world are fabricated, and the liberation that comes with that. And then being able to step back into the fabricated world, seeing it all as, again, divine appearance, all of it. And can we relate to it like that? And again, so this is where there comes to be something deeply mystical, actually, which is, what do I want? This is almost an unanswerable question, I think, actually, because those wants change over time. But who wants? What do you want when you see through the illusion of separation, when you see yourself as theophany, a direct expression of divinity in everything, in every thought, and every desire? Who wants what you want? And can we open to that? Knowing that our desires will change. Yeah, maybe it's sex and money. Cool, go for it. And if you get it, well, it probably won't stay that forever. Maybe you'll want something a little bit deeper, a little bit richer than maybe those flat pursuits. But again, it's almost God's desire to connect with its self through senses of sacredness, ritual, meaning, ceremony, trance. All of these ways we can really get in touch as God, witnessing God, saying, looking good. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. It's open. There's no wrong desires. None. And that can be scary at first because this is beyond the traditional cultural notions of good and bad. But if we can open to the flow of desire, then we might find that we're living, I don't know, a more fulfilled life. And also, we're in a very heady place right now. But again, desire comes from the body. You feel these things again intimately in your emotional being, and opening to that can be scary because there's a lot that goes with opening to the flow of desire, including the risk of not getting that which you want, and that hurts. It's that I spit game to that girl, and she was not about it, and damn, dagger in the heart. Or I applied for that job and someone else got it, or um, it can be anything. If you shoot for the stars and you don't get what you want, ouch. And can we open to that? Can
Mm,
we? Can we let spirit move us? It's an open question.
yeah. Mm. The what do I want question is so good. What do I want?
What do you want, Ethan?
Because so much suffering is like, oh, I'm afraid I'm not going to get what I want. I'm afraid I'm not going to be as successful as I want to be. I'm afraid I'm not going to make as much money as I think I'm going to make. These are actually the ones that
And
are on my mind right now. Truthfully, like,
yeah, well,
oh,
the
I want to
question
hold
is,
on to
I
this
think, and then
success.
what?
This success is so nice. I don't want this to go away, and it's like it's a
Yeah.
deep contraction.
And think about people like Christ, people like Buddha, real individuals. People like the sadhus living in India right now. They own nothing. Success? Who gives a fuck? Like, what do you mean? They wander around with a robe. Success? What is that? Spiritual
So
attainment, maybe. Maybe they measure it in a different way. It's not material. But again, just pointing to Christ and Buddha, people who own nothing. What do you think the quality of their experience was? I'm going to guess pretty high. And so
okay,
there again, this brings me back to the notion of contraction, clinging, and suffering, which is that the quality of life does not actually come from getting what we want. It comes from letting go. Happiness does not come from getting everything we want. It's like we have these barriers in our psyche saying, I can only be happy if I prove myself, if I prove my dad wrong because he was a dick and I'm gonna make it. If I show my ex I'm not a loser, then I'm okay. And I need seven figures to do that. Okay. So you're creating a boundary to love in your mind, saying I can actually not love myself until I have these externally validating things. Little did we know we created that boundary to deep, deep love. And we can actually just remove it by seeing it, being like, oh, I'm saying I'm not enough unless I have a trophy wife and, a Lambo and I can take, 6 vacations to whatever, Iceland a year, whatever rich people do. But yeah, it really is like we don't need the external things. We need to understand how the mind works, how perception functions in order to be able to access, again, those deep states of contentedness, love, warmth on demand. Because again, what was the Buddha pointing to? His disciples, what was Christ pointing to? Is this just made up? And again, have we forgotten the value of these words, of these teachings? And I would say a lot of people have, and the effects are devastating. Devastating. And we need to remember that happiness, contentedness, high quality of experience does not come from outside of ourselves. You can be a beggar. You can move like Christ. And depending on the quality of your mind and the boundaries you set up or the lack thereof to love, enoughness, divinity, that determines your quality of life, in my opinion. But again, it's like we set up the walls and we give ourselves the key when I'm making 6 figures. All of a sudden, oh, now I can finally open up myself to I'm enough. But actually, what we'll find if we are feeding this feedback loop of lack, once we get the 7 figures, I'm still not enough. Because we're feeding this muscle of lack and inferiority. We're nourishing that view. And so it is. And because we're feeding it, we're not. And this is where grief and pain and suffering have a place. Specifically, I want to point to grief because what happens if my dad was right? My ex was right. What if I'm a fucking loser? What if I'm not enough? What if my life is a fucking failure? So what? Quite literally, so what? There will be feelings, there will be thoughts. Can we hold those? Can we be with them? Can we not run? Can we not get stuck in what's called prapancha, the web of thought? This is the poly word for when the mind just spins and creates all these stories out of thin air about I'm not enough and now my life's ruined. I'm going to be homeless and no one's going to ever love me and I'm going to die alone. Papancha. This is just excessive thought. Can we just be with the thought of I'm a failure? Now what? Well, I can grieve that, let the tears come, feel those things, open up and be like, actually, life's not that bad. It's like that SpongeBob episode. What is he like? I'm a loser and I'm proud. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't remember.
No, there's a or like I'm stinky and I'm proud. I don't know. It's a SpongeBob thing, but again, I think we need to understand the interior world to a degree where we can again construct the world of our dreams, become the architects of perception, because we have those capabilities right now. Although those capabilities may be latent in most people, we still have them.
Hmm. Can I? How much time do we have left?
Bro, I could keep going for a minute. Yeah, we can keep going. I mean, there's no limit on this podcast.
Cool, man. I have a couple thoughts, but they might open a can of worms. So
Let's just see where it goes.
I almost want to push back on some of those things. So there's a couple perspectives that I've explored recently. To kind of an easy way to intro it is like, okay, this idea of karma, or this idea of sometimes you have to burn through that karma. Sometimes, like, to say like, oh, I'm fine with nothing. It's like, well, have you fully burned through the karma yet that you actually want things? You want money and a hot wife, and like, don't repress that. That's where like your karmic whatever is, it's still present. You can't pretend like it's not there, you know? And so this is a pretty radical idea. But Nietzsche, in the book that he wrote, Genealogy of Morals, he has this crazy idea. He basically says that all of religion and morals is, how do I put it? I don't want to butcher this because it's a pretty sensitive idea. He basically says that religion was created by poor people because they were resentful of rich people, and so they wanted to have a moral system that made it good to not own shit.
Interesting.
And it's like, I'm not
Yeah,
saying I fully agree with that, but I think there's something about this idea that, like, when you try to say
mhm.
like you can be happy with nothing, is there resentment there? Like, is there like, oh, I wish I was fucking rich, but I kind of resent that. And I've met so
Yeah.
many people where it feels like this is true, where it's like, you wish you were rich, and I can tell it, but I can tell that this, like, I am happy with nothing. I can tell there's like resentment in the way that it's being carried or spoken. And it's like,
Yeah.
first you have to burn through that karma. Like, maybe it doesn't mean you
Mm,
have to be rich, but like, if that's the desire, follow it until you realize how unsatisfying it truly is. Only
yes.
then can you actually release that desire. But if you don't
Bro,
actually fully understand how unsatisfying it is, good luck fucking releasing it. So that's the thought.
yeah, no, I love everything you're saying. I completely agree. I actually completely agree. I'm just saying, and I think that these two views are actually not in conflict. I think that again, Christ, Buddha, you could say from the karmic perspective, have burned off. I mean, they were ready for nothing. They were
Right.
ready for the sublime, the boundless nothing. Um, but like you or me, bro, I want money and a hot wife. And if there's any hot wife material watching this, shout out, hit me up on Instagram, duff100. But but no, for sure. I mean, that's the thing. So that's just one lens, which is if we can just let go, let go, and open to the peace of not actually holding on again. I think there's a radical freedom there. And again, but it's an empty view to say that is the end of the path objectively. It's infinite. And from the soul making or the depth psychological lens, you could say there are certain images that want to live through us. And maybe it's not necessarily about pleasure in the sense desire sense. Yeah. as far as like I want to feel pleasure, I want smoking hot wife and a lot of money and cool vacations. But you want to embody an image. I want to be fucking God on earth. I want to be Dan Bilzerian type. That's actually fine. And I think there's a balance to this though, because is if I become super rich and my lifestyle is at the expense of those less fortunate, we have to understand the non-duality of experience and see, hey, who are you shitting on right now? It's actually you.
Yeah.
And also, what is the value of giving? Can I live a certain mythopoetic life, have access to a certain amount of resources, and still know the beauty and the richness of giving? And because I say that full heartedly, and so this also points to the horizontal and the vertical dimensions that I was pointing to before, where eros, desire, it has the horizontal plane where I want, diverse experiences. I want a lot of nice stuff. I want security. Good, good. But is that the only dimension of experience we have access to where we can funnel our desires? Because again, how fulfilling can worshiping God in a sense where, okay, everyone, you're circling whatever that big black cube is. Was that Mecca? Um, you're doing that.
Yeah, I
You're
think so.
doing that for a day or a weekend with, thousands of other people. You think you feel the Holy Ghost? I would say you probably do. You're praying with thousands of people. You're, at the Vatican. What do you feel? That depth, that meaningfulness, that divinity, that connection. That is a depth that we need to learn how to funnel our eros, our desire into, to penetrate those depths. And it is like, it is a penetration. I want to taste that. I want to connect. I want my desire to flow into that. And I want it ravenously. Just like I want the smoking hot wife and I want the fancy car. Can I want it all? But can I see again, what is the impact? What really gets me what I want? What are the limitations of materiality, of material things, of experiences? Because I'm sure you've had them. I've had them. Being in beautiful places, traveling around, and just it's flat. This is like, like this is super cool. Like I'll take an Instagram video and then be like, it's all right. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
it's missing that vertical dimensionality. Where what happens if we engage in prayer, depth, some sort of ceremony, some rite to invoke a certain lived experience of, the spiritual, a deeper dimension of experience. So I completely agree with you. But the question for me is, what feeds a high quality of experience? What nourishes the deepest parts of our being? And that's an open question.
Yeah, well there's something about beauty and aesthetics here that I think is really relevant. And it's this when you mention like being in Mecca or in the Vatican, one of the things that blows my mind is like why don't we still produce things like this, like the Vatican, like these
Yes, I've said
cathedrals?
that.
Why is this a thing of the past?
Right,
We haven't
right.
we have transcended it into what, box housing with McDonald's and fast food joints, like and
Skyscrapers, which are
skyscrapers. Like
cool.
this
It
is
does,
not. There's no aesthetics in that, and so
dude. Yes.
why not? It's
And
like probably
what is
because
the role?
materialism is the dominant paradigm now. Like that's probably
and
why.
and functionality, as far as this functionalistic, I only care what this can do for me, so I make the building that maximizes profit, minimizes how much I have to spend on it. What about beauty? What is a life without beauty? And these places, the Vatican, holy places, Buddhist temples, you walk into some places and there is evokes out of you a sense of reverence, because consciousness and place and world are not separate. When I enter a breathtaking cathedral, like those that are in Barcelona, for instance, you're gripped. You're like, you almost want to like just naturally just take your shoes off, take a knee, because you're like, oh my God. And that sense of reverence, God touches you through place, through setting, through beauty. When I'm in the mountains, when I'm out in the San Juans or the Maroon Bells, and it's breathtakingly beautiful, I literally just want to say a prayer, say thank you. It's like those moments, these places are not separate from us. And we have forgotten, like when we just create office buildings and cubicles, that your soul reflects that. And if you're in beautiful places, if we can build beauty again, and this is what's possible for humanity in our lifetime, is to recognize the value of beauty in cultivating an exponentially improved human experience. How do people treat each other at the Vatican? Pretty good, I would say. Pretty well, pretty connected, pretty open, pretty reverent. Why don't we build spaces like that? How would that affect how we treat each other instead of living in this functionalist? It's only about what can people do for me. How much of that is a reflection of the places we build? I'm so glad you went there because I've had this thought for so long. Why don't we? Why don't we build pyramids? Worship God. Say, hey, yeah, everything will turn to dust at some point. We're gonna have fucking pyramids here for at least another 20,000 years to show people how much we loved creation. For sure, like you know what I mean. This is possible for us. James Hillman has a lecture about this, about beauty. We seek beauty in nature, but why don't we build it ourselves? Knowing damn well we could, that we have, but yet we don't recognize, we haven't yet understood the value of it. But
Yeah,
I
there's
think it's important to see the value. Yeah, yeah, go on. I
yeah
was just
there
going to say, I
there's
think it's
this.
important. We could also just point to what is, my bad. It's like cutting out. You got it.
Yeah, I think it's cutting out a little bit. It's a little laggy on my end.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's easy to take this view that like humans are destroying the planet and we are just like creating, a bunch of structures that are, we're building in capitalism. But it's like we are a part of nature too. Like human beings is a creation of nature itself, and why can't
Mm.
our creations be a creation of creation? It's a mouthful. It's a mouthful, but like a cathedral is something a human made, yet it's fucking beautiful. A
Insane. Yeah.
McDonald's is also something a human made, and it's fucking gross. And like, but it's like what is yeah, it's like what is driving it, and it's yeah. I would love
Totally.
to, sure. I don't want to cut down a bunch of trees, but if we build a wooden structure that is beautiful, why is that
Mm.
bad? It's
Let's look.
serving it's
I mean,
serving something that's beautiful, and so
dude, it reminds me of Burning Man. Like I went to Burning Man for the first time last year, and the structures, the art that they build is fucking insane.
mhm.
So the temple that they burn at the end, the man that they burn, it's incredible, and it's all made to burn. Beautiful, poetic, and it's just the transience of beauty, recognizing even these great cathedrals, these solemn temples will turn to dust and leave not a rack behind. This is Shakespeare, and he said, "We are the stuff that dreams are made on. This little life is rounded with the sleep. Everything is transient." And can we still construct beauty, recognizing the necessity of it? Like, again, how does that impact you? When you're in a cubicle, how does that impact you? When you're just living in filth, you don't clean your room, how does that impact you? When you decorate your apartment to be a reflection of who you are, how does that impact you? Again, it's like a feedback loop where my psyche gets kind of molded by my surroundings, and then I create, if I have any, ambition, a reflection of those of my own psyche, of my mind. And then so it's like almost, this is interesting. So I have this theory about the rapture, the biblical rapture, being this split in polarities between kind of fear and like giving up and not trying, and then opening to love, acceptance, beauty, opening to life, and how these polarities seem to be getting stronger and stronger. So you have those people that don't clean their rooms and don't have ambition and just whatever. I mean, nothing against video games, they're chill, but it's just like, what leads to a good life? Let's just ask that. And as these polarities start to split harder and harder, um, some will be saved, Some will find, I'm going to go in this direction of feeding beauty, feeding acceptance, feeding love, openness, connection. And some others will go in the direction of whatever, giving up, living in filth, forgetting about beauty and having their minds reflect that. So that's just a theory I was kind of like juggling around today, but it kind of works in this kind of feedback loop understanding of beauty, where again, the psyche, the soul, the spirit of the people that built those cathedrals, that built, iconic structures to God and just in general, those artists, those architects, what was the quality of their consciousness? Those people that are, again, like volunteering their time to build structures devoted to God, the quality of their consciousness is set on that. I would guess, unless they're forced. I doubt it. I mean, even if you did, an offering to God is an offering to God. And so it's like, you see how this is a feedback loop? Like the beauty of the soul, of the psyche, builds more beauty, and the lack thereof builds the lack thereof. And maybe this is what Rob talks about to save the world that we're living in with the environmental crisis, wealth inequality, greed, deception, censorship, just all sorts of fucked up stuff. What if the way to save this world was by invoking real lived direct experiences of beauty? And with beauty, there comes love, honor, duty to propagate, respect, and honor that which you love. Through the experience of beauty, maybe that builds inherent values in the human to honor themselves, to honor others as reflections of, the divine beauty. It's an interesting angle. And I'm wondering what you think about that as far as beauty being the way to, um, solve a lot of problems, honestly, is by connecting with beauty again. It seems like we're in a world that has forgotten or is starved of beauty, visually, the aesthetic of beauty, but emotionally in those resonances too. I think you're muted.
Oh yeah, it was. It started to rain. It was super loud.
Oh, no
Yeah.
worries.
So to ground into beauty is absolutely important, and it's absolutely needed. And to kind of further this point, any experience is beautiful. Like deep suffering and grief has beauty in it. Deep, and so it's like there's rapture and awe, which I associate with very positive feelings. But there's like grief that is also
Mm,
beautiful. And I wanted to weave in something that I'm still struggling to fit it into my hold it as a view and understand how it relates to everything. But there's this idea that Eastern religion teaches us that all desire is the source of suffering. Western religion teaches us that desire and suffering is the source of all creative beauty in the world. There's
mm,
this juxtaposition between desire is suffering, and desire and suffering are the source of beauty and the source of creativity and creation. And so this is something I don't really know. I don't really know what the point of me saying this is, but like it feels important to say. I had a phase where I was really into Jordan Peterson. I had a phase where I was like really into his message, and specifically like reading his more recent book, We Who Wrestle with God. And it's like really, he just like dives into Christian theology a lot. It's like a little bit technical into theology in a way that like I was like, okay, I don't need to know this much, but
mm,
one of the things that he talks about in that book a lot is that it feels to me like he puts suffering on a pedestal. Like he essentially says that Christianity says that the point of life is to suffer towards truth, beauty, and goodness, and that to
mm,
like he basically makes a claim that it's impossible to strive towards truth, beauty, and goodness without experiencing suffering, and that to carry the weight of doing good is extremely hard and requires suffering. And so I almost wonder, like, with those people that made the cathedral, maybe they were tapped into beauty, but maybe they were deeply suffering at the
Mm,
same time. Like,
mm,
so
mm,
when we say, like,
mm,
I struggle with this idea of suffering so much, because it's like, yes, like deep emptiness helps free us from suffering. And like this idea that like some of the most profound works of literature were created by people who are obviously extremely deep in suffering and contraction,
mhm.
like
Of art in
Dostoevsky or
general.
Tolstoy, or these people. It's like it's
Yeah.
dark shit, but it's beautiful. There's true beauty in it.
Mm,
And so
mm.
where does like the kind of like carry the biggest burden that you can bear towards the highest possible good and beauty, like where does that fit in to Buddhism?
Hmm.
And it's something I'm asking myself, and I'm not really sure.
That that's I mean that's a great question. I mean, it brought up the archetype of Christ, which is we all need our cross to bear, and recognizing what is that which we're willing to suffer for, that which we love that deeply, that we're willing to bear the cross. And there's again so much beauty in that sacrifice, in that um, giving, giving to creation. It gives me chills, and that beauty is potent. I think again we need to have a thorough understanding of emptiness in order to really address this question, because all we're left with radical, thorough, absolute emptiness is just different perspectives that lead to different experiences. And the experience of sacrifice for beauty is valid. I don't know if that's the only avenue to beauty, is sacrifice and letting go of individual self. Because again, we construct the path, we empower the path through belief, and then we walk it. And that does not give it inherent reality. It means it's an empty fabrication. It still is experienced as real, as far as I have to bear this cross, or else I won't taste the beauty of life. I won't connect with God. That's an empty path. It's still real, felt as
Mm-hmm.
such. This is where a thorough understanding of emptiness is essential, because we can say, I think the poetry in that lens, the depth of it, I mean, it speaks for itself. Sacrificing your life for humanity, deeply suffering, dying on the cross, bro, it goes so incredibly hard. Like it touches the deepest parts of your being. But is that the only story, the only narratives that have the potential to touch the deepest parts of our being?
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing that creation is always flowing, growing, and evolving. Maybe the collective human psyche will feed, embody, and maybe manifest a new myth of deeply resonant spirituality that affects the psyche
Mm-hmm.
in a different way. And I'm just
Yeah.
saying we don't know, because the human psyche is evolving always. It's not fixed. And Christ was 2,000 years ago. The Buddha was 2,500. We're in a new pivotal age here with AI. And have you heard the telepathy tapes, by the way, that podcast?
Cut out a little bit. What's the name of the podcast?
Did you hear? It's called the telepathy tapes.
No, I haven't heard of it.
Dude, you absolutely need to listen to it. So the whole premise is that there are nonverbal autists, people with autism that can't speak, that are usually like flailing and can't control their bodies. We normally are viewing these people as just severely handicapped, but they actually found a way through assisted writing to have these people communicate, and the depth of what these people are saying is insane. The fact, not just that they can be telepathic with their parents and teachers, they've actually taught their teachers how to be telepathic back. And this has been like shunned. Not just telepathic. There are, again, certain people, nonverbal autists, that one guy could put his hand on a book and then communicate the entire book, like summaries. And so what do they have access to? There's also these people have deep understandings of spirituality, of truth, of love, of goodness. Um, Even though maybe to the external world they're so sensitive that they're completely overwhelmed by the coarseness of this place, um, their sensitivity allows them to tap into those higher, more subtle aspects of existence. Like this is where we talk about extrasensory perception and the psychic. And I'm interested how this. You need to listen to this podcast because it's not just woo woo. They're like it's not just statistically significant. It's a 95% accuracy rate with these kids being able to read the minds of their parents, like reading page for page what they're reading in a different room. So, okay, what's going on there? We're on the precipice of a merging of, I think, the internal psychic technologies with the artificial, with the man-made technological AI, which I think is incredibly exciting and a crazy fucking wild card. So you have to listen to that podcast and get back to me because John, our homie John, also listened to it, and he's a very innately skeptical person about a lot of things, and he was blown away. So I can't wait for you to listen to it, Ethan.
Yeah, I'll give it a listen. I'll give it a listen.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I want to wrap up one point on one of the things
Yeah.
you said, and then we can maybe wrap up the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's to say like bear your cross for the good. I think that I think there's a distinction here that I'm just starting to make, which is like to bear your cross does not necessarily mean to suffer, right? And like I think for most people, it does mean that, but it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily have to. And
Mm.
it feels to me like when we think about like love, like to access the deepest levels of love possible, it's fucking hard. Like that's not an easy task. You know, it's you're not just gonna get there willy nilly. And so there's this we've talked about this before. I don't know if I've used this word before, but like contemplative fitness or
Mm.
contemplative CrossFit. It's just like this idea that like
Mm.
yes, ultimately to see the emptiness of things will reduce suffering massively. And to get there is not going to be easy.
Yeah.
To get to that realization is not easy. And so it's like, I don't want to suffer more than I have to, but potentially if I'm trying to take as direct a route as possible towards absolute, towards love, towards truth, towards beauty, I'm probably going to suffer. I don't even know if suffering is the right word. It's going to be painful, probably a lot more painful than if I would have not tried to take a direct route to that thing, to that ideal.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like maybe if you put yourself in the fire of trying to serve the
Mm-hmm.
beautiful and the true and the good,
Yeah.
maybe
And
the degree of pain that you will experience is what forces you to let go of the suffering. Partly.
wow. I mean, I think it brought a couple things to mind, and then we can wrap this up. This has been an incredible conversation, but I would say it made me think of just the value of pain, which is that it does force you to let go, and it made me think of this book called Born to Run. They talk about these like really long distance runners, and they say one of the main factors in determining like a really successful ultra marathon runner is actually an access to kindness and love. If there's like a lot of hostility, it's like the body breaks down.
Hmm.
And interestingly, if you can open to that, immense pain of running hundreds of miles, let's just put it like that, your body can somehow keep going. And who knows, maybe you're opening up to something beyond yourself, actually. And the strength that comes into the being through letting go. What is that? What is that? Through like lowering the resistance to pain. How does that, again, so what we experience, the way we see things, how we see things creates what we experience. So, perception, the viewer and the viewed are one thing. So if I have a relationship built off resistance to pain, again, from Shinzen's analogy that suffering is pain multiplied by resistance, I'm actually amplifying my subjective experience of pain or of suffering. So if I lower my resistance to the suffering, if I bear that cross like a fucking gangster and say, I happily do it again, for the people I fucking love, for the world I love.
Uh-huh.
If I hold that mentality, how does that change my subjective experience of suffering? Again, it reminds me of sort of I think it's Dante's Inferno, where I think the way out of hell is you got to crawl through Satan's mouth or through his legs or something like that. You got to do that thing you don't want to do. You got to bear that cross, and you got to do it like a fucking gangster. And at that point, you'll be like, again, to the degree that you can open to that suffering, maybe you'd be like, hey, it's actually not that bad. That's my theory, and that might be a place to wrap it up. We're about at 90 minutes.
Yeah, man. Thanks for the conversation. This was insane.
Dude,
Once again.
I know, dude. This was an absolute banger, bro. We got to keep doing these, man. Maybe we should do like a legit, we should do an off spin, do our own podcast, because this is fucking sick.
Why not, man? Let's make it happen.
Yeah, we totally could. But all right, Ethan, thank you again so much for doing this conversation. We went in crazy places, and I'm stoked for people to see these convos. I don't know if the first one we did posted on YouTube yet. I've been scheduling them like kind of weeks out, but yeah, thank you, my man.
Appreciate it, dude.